Sometimes downfall doesn't come with a crash. It begins with a whisper, a look, a smirk that says, "I know better than you." That was the first thing I noticed when he walked in. Ethan, the new hire. His footsteps echoed across the floor like he already owned the place. His tailored suit, his glossy shoes, even the way he held his coffee cup, like the world owed him admiration. At that moment I didn't realize how much damage one arrogant newcomer could cause. But oh, I would learn. And so would he. This is the story of his downfall, and how arrogance can be the very thing that buries you. It was Monday morning, early spring in Chicago. The kind of morning where the air outside still bit your skin with leftover winter chill. But inside the office, the fluorescent lights buzzed with artificial warmth. Our office sat on the 14th floor of a glass building overlooking the river. A typical corporate space, gray carpets, white walls with abstract art, desks lined in neat rows, and the faint smell of burnt coffee always lingering near the break room. Most Mondays, people dragged themselves in with half-open eyes, clutching their Starbucks cups, muttering small talk about weekend plans or Chicago's unpredictable weather. But that Monday wasn't ordinary, because that Monday he walked in. I remember turning from my desk when I heard the elevator ding. The doors slid open and there he was. Ethan. He didn't just walk into the room, he commanded it. His suit was perfectly fitted, charcoal gray with a subtle pinstripe. His tie was silk, deep navy, knotted like he'd rehearsed it. His shoes were polished so well they reflected the ceiling lights. And then there was that smirk. The kind of smirk you only see in movies, the one villains give right before they reveal they've already rigged the game. My manager, Mr. Harris, introduced him quickly. "Everyone, this is Ethan. He'll be joining us as a senior consultant." Senior consultant. That already turned heads. Most people worked years before landing that title. But Ethan? He'd barely sat down and already had the role. Back then, none of us realized what kind of storm was about to hit. The arrogance. The interruptions. The subtle digs at everyone else's work. But arrogance has a strange way of writing its own ending. And Ethan's ending? Let's just say it wasn't the promotion he thought he deserved. It was his downfall. One that everyone in the office would remember. After the introductions, Ethan strolled over to a cluster of desks near me. He didn't ask where he should sit. He just placed his leather briefcase on the prime corner desk, the one closest to the windows with the best view of the skyline. That desk had been unofficially shared territory for project meetings. No one had claimed it because we rotated, but Ethan? He marked it like territory. He leaned back in the chair, pulled out his laptop, brand new MacBook Pro of course, and adjusted his cufflinks. He glanced around the office, his eyes skimming over people like he was taking inventory. Then he said, loud enough for half the floor to hear, "So this is the team? Looks like we're going to need to tighten things up around here." People exchanged looks. Half smiles, half annoyance. We just met the guy, and he was already talking like he was in charge. And me? I sat there biting back a laugh thinking, this guy is either going to crash hard, or make us all miserable. You know those moments when your instincts scream at you? Mine did that morning. Something in me whispered, watch him closely. This won't end well. And I was right. Because what Ethan didn't know was that every arrogant move, every smug correction, every careless insult was building a trap. A trap he was setting for himself. And when the moment came, I would be the one to show everyone the truth. Ethan thought he was climbing toward a throne. But really? He was walking straight into his own downfall. The camera would linger on Ethan's smirk, the office skyline behind him, the ticking of a wall clock echoing faintly. And let me tell you, there's nothing more satisfying than watching arrogance implode. This is Ethan's downfall story. My name is Skylar Bennett. I was 29 when this happened. Not the youngest in the office, not the oldest, just comfortably in the middle. I'd been with the firm for 5 years by then, long enough to know every hidden shortcut in our project database, every trick for getting the coffee machine to cooperate, and every unspoken rule of survival in corporate America. We weren't a glamorous Fortune 500 company, just a mid-sized consulting firm tucked away in downtown Chicago, specializing in helping businesses streamline operations and cut costs. Not exactly the kind of job that turns heads at cocktail parties, but it paid my rent, gave me stability, and, at least before Ethan, it gave me a sense of family. Our team was a mix of personalities. Angela, the quiet numbers genius who could spot an error in a spreadsheet from 3 desks away. Marcus, the loud storyteller who made every lunch break feel like stand-up comedy. Tina, the HR assistant, always sneaking chocolates into people's drawers when they looked stressed. And then there was Mr. Harris, our manager. Calm, practical, the kind of leader who never raised his voice but somehow commanded respect just by walking into the room. We weren't perfect, but we were balanced. Workplace drama existed, of course, it always does, but it was manageable. We had inside jokes, we celebrated birthdays with store-bought cake, and we complained about the same things together. Long client calls, endless PowerPoints, and the elevator that always got stuck on the 7th floor. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked. Until Ethan. I wasn't ambitious in the flashy sense. I didn't dream of becoming CEO or running the world. I wanted to be respected, to grow steadily, to feel like my work mattered. Outside the office, my life was simple. I had a tiny apartment with a balcony that barely fit 2 chairs. My best friend lived 3 blocks away, and on Friday nights we'd grab Thai takeout and binge whatever Netflix series was trending. I wasn't extraordinary, and maybe that's why Ethan got under my skin so much. Because from the moment he stepped into the office, he treated people like me, as ordinary, as disposable. There's something you should know. Before Ethan, our office wasn't competitive in a cutthroat way. Yes, we worked hard, but we shared knowledge, double-checked each other's work, and celebrated small wins. When a client signed a new contract, we'd cheer. When someone messed up, we'd cover for them, fix it together, and move on. That's what made Ethan stand out so sharply. He didn't come in to join the team. He came in to dominate it. But to understand the scale of his arrogance, you need to understand what he walked into. A culture of collaboration. He shattered that like glass. Skylar, voice soft, almost whisper. I didn't hate Ethan at first. I tried to be polite. Gave him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he was nervous. Maybe the arrogance was just a mask. But arrogance isn't a mask when it cuts people down. It's a sword. And he swung it carelessly. What Ethan didn't realize was that every sword swing left a paper trail. Emails, drafts, witnesses, all waiting to circle back when the time was right. Before Ethan, mornings were routine. We'd gather in the break room half asleep, gossiping about the weekend. Someone would always forget to bring milk for the coffee, and Marcus would joke that it was a corporate conspiracy. By 9:15, the office settled into its rhythm. Keyboards clicking, phones buzzing, muted laughter here and there. I loved that sound, the quiet productivity of people who knew each other, trusted each other. That rhythm was the heartbeat of our office. And Ethan was about to throw it completely off beat. Looking back, I wonder. Did Ethan know how arrogant he sounded? Did he mean to insult us, or was he so blinded by his ego that he couldn't see it? All I know is this: every empire falls. Sometimes with fire, sometimes with silence. And Ethan's? It began the moment he opened his mouth on day 1. In the next weeks, he interrupted presentations, corrected people mid-sentence, bragged about his Ivy League degree, and scoffed at anyone who dared suggest something he didn't agree with. And me? I watched. I listened. I collected every slip, every arrogant remark. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I knew sooner or later the office would need proof. And when that day came, I would be ready. This isn't just a story about a new hire. This is a story about how arrogance builds its own trap, and how one woman, me, decided not to let it slide. If part 1 of Ethan's story was about his grand entrance, part 3 is about what came next. The unraveling. Arrogance doesn't explode all at once. It drips, little by little, until suddenly the floor is flooded, and you're drowning in it. It started in our very first team meeting with Ethan. We were presenting to a client about streamlining their supply chain. Angela was halfway through explaining her analysis when Ethan leaned back, smirked, and said, "Actually, that's not quite right." What Angela meant to say was, Angela froze mid-sentence. She hadn't misspoken. She hadn't needed correction. But Ethan didn't stop. He clicked the remote, took over the slides, and went off on a tangent filled with buzzwords like synergy, scalability, and disruptive innovation. The client blinked, confused. Angela's face turned red. And me? I wanted to sink into the floor. Client awkwardly. So, which recommendation are we going with? Angela's or yours? Ethan with fake confidence. Mine, of course. It's clearly the stronger strategy. It wasn't. His version completely ignored key data. But he said it so smoothly, so arrogantly, that the client didn't push further. Not then anyway. After the meeting in the hallway, Angela whispered to me, "Who does this guy think he is?" And I whispered back, "Apparently our self-appointed boss." A few days later we were in the break room. Marcus was telling a funny story about his kid's soccer game, how the referee tripped over the ball and landed face first in the mud. Everyone laughed. Then Ethan chimed in, not with laughter but with, "Cute. But when I was in high school I was the captain of my soccer team, and we won the state championship. So yeah, I guess I can't really relate to losing stories." The room went silent. Marcus forced a smile, but I could see the sting in his eyes. Ethan didn't notice. Or maybe he did and he liked it. By week 2 we'd heard it all. His Ivy League MBA. His summer internship at a world-class hedge fund. The time he single-handedly turned around a project. First we tried to be polite. Nodded, smiled. But it got old. Fast. I remember one morning, I was reviewing spreadsheets when Ethan strolled by and said, loud enough for the whole row to hear, "Skylar, I wouldn't waste too much time on those. At my old firm we had interns do that grunt work. Your skills are probably better used elsewhere." I clenched my jaw. He called it grunt work. The same analysis that kept our biggest client happy. The same work that had earned me respect from my manager. To him it was beneath him, and apparently beneath me too. One afternoon Mr. Harris pulled me aside. "Skylar, I know Ethan's a lot. But just keep an eye on him for me, okay? Make sure he doesn't go too far off track." "You want me to babysit him?" "Think of it as quality control." I nodded, but inside I was fuming. Why was it my job to clean up his messes? Still I agreed. Because deep down I already knew. Ethan was heading for a fall. I just had to make sure I was ready when it came. The tension reached a peak during another client call. Ethan interrupted 3 times. Each time he corrected people, promised things we couldn't deliver, and brushed off concerns. When the call ended, the client emailed immediately. "Please clarify your strategy. We are concerned about inconsistencies in your proposal." My stomach dropped. Inconsistencies. That was code for, "We don't trust you." Mr. Harris called me into his office. "Skylar, review Ethan's proposal line by line. Fix whatever you can before this gets worse." I nodded, already pulling up the files. And as I scrolled through Ethan's flashy slides, filled with vague promises and empty buzzwords, I realized he wasn't just arrogant. He was reckless. And reckless people, they eventually write their own downfall. I started keeping a mental notebook. Every mistake, every insult, every careless moment where Ethan's arrogance put us all at risk. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I knew someday the office would need proof. And when that day came, I'd be ready. Arrogance had taken root in our office. It was poisoning lunches, meetings, even friendships. Ethan thought he was climbing to the top. But what he didn't see was that every step he took was cracking the ground beneath him. And soon it would collapse. My name is Skylar. And if there's one thing I've learned in all my years of working, it's this: arrogance has a funny way of writing its own downfall. But I didn't know that yet, at least not when Ethan first walked into our office. All I knew was that something about him didn't sit right. The smirk, the swagger, the way he looked around like the place was already his kingdom. I want you to imagine this. It's Monday morning, one of those gray, rainy Mondays in downtown Chicago. The kind where the city looks half asleep, and so do the people dragging themselves to work with lukewarm coffee in hand. The elevator in our building creaked as it carried us up to the 17th floor, where our marketing firm Brightside Strategies lived and breathed deadlines. The office always smelled faintly of burnt coffee and printer ink. Phones ringing, keyboards clacking, someone coughing in the corner cubicle. It was routine, familiar, safe, until Ethan showed up. Ethan's entrance. He didn't walk in like a new hire. He walked in like an actor stepping onto a stage, every movement deliberate, every glance calculated. His tailored suit was far too expensive for someone supposedly just starting out. His hair, gelled back in perfect glossy waves. His smile, Not warm, not humble, but cocky, like he'd already won something the rest of us didn't even know we were competing for. And he carried himself with this air. Not of gratitude for the opportunity, but entitlement. Like the company was lucky to have him. I watched him shake hands with our manager, Alan, and then with a few team members. He didn't just introduce himself, he performed. "Ethan Carter," he said, voice smooth, deliberate, like he was auditioning for a commercial. "I'm here to make an impact. Hope you're ready. Hope you're ready." Who says that on their first day? I remember exchanging a look with my colleague Jenna across the aisle. Her eyebrows shot up and we both stifled a laugh. But something in my chest tightened. Not out of humor but out of warning. You know how sometimes when you meet someone new, your gut whispers before your brain catches up? That was me right there. My gut said this guy is trouble. And I wasn't wrong. Over the weeks that followed, Ethan's arrogance grew like a weed, taking up space, choking out the light. First it was little things. The way he interrupted people in meetings. The way he dismissed ideas if they weren't his. The way he rolled his eyes, subtly but enough that you noticed, whenever someone less brilliant than him spoke. But arrogance has a way of escalating. And Ethan, he was on a fast track. First I tried to ignore it. I buried myself in my work like I always did. I wasn't one to pick fights. I preferred peace, keeping my head down. But every time I saw him strut through the office, every time I overheard his snide comments, I felt that knot in my stomach grow tighter. It wasn't just me noticing either. The atmosphere in our once collaborative office shifted. People grew quieter, more cautious. Meetings turned into stages for Ethan's monologues. And slowly I realized, he wasn't just arrogant. He was manipulative. He wanted power. And he didn't care who he had to step on to get it. Now, I'm telling you this story not just because it happened, but because of what happened next. You see, arrogance unchecked, it always meets its match. Sometimes the match is circumstance. Sometimes it's karma. And sometimes, well, sometimes it's someone like me. And believe me, Ethan never saw it coming. Because behind every cocky smirk, behind every fake compliment, behind every overconfident move he made, I was watching. Taking notes. Learning his weaknesses. Waiting for the perfect moment. This isn't just another office story. This is a downfall story. When Ethan first arrived, he thought he could outshine everyone. But what he didn't realize was that his own ego would become the noose tightening around his neck. And I would be there to pull the final thread. But let's rewind. Let me take you back to the very beginning, before Ethan's arrogance poisoned the air, before his games nearly tore apart our team. Let me show you who I was, who he pretended to be, and how this storm began. Because only then will you understand how satisfying his downfall truly was. My name is Skylar Jensen, 32 years old, born and raised in a small town outside Minneapolis, Minnesota. I wasn't the type to chase big dreams in New York or Los Angeles. I wasn't flashy or cutthroat or hungry for the spotlight. I was steady, reliable, the kind of person who kept the wheels turning while others fought for the driver's seat. People have always described me as the glue, the one who keeps the team together, who smooths conflicts, who remembers birthdays, who stays late when deadlines loom. And honestly, I didn't mind that. I wasn't after fame or recognition. I just wanted to do good work, contribute, and go home to my quiet apartment with my rescue cat, Oliver, and maybe a Netflix series I'd never finish. For 7 years, that was my rhythm at Brightside Strategies. 7 years of morning coffees in the same chipped mug, of helping new interns learn the ropes of being the one Alan, the manager, could always count on when things got messy. And in a way, that quiet reliability was what made me Ethan's perfect target. Brightside Strategies wasn't a huge corporate giant. It was mid-sized, about 50 employees spread across 2 floors of a glassy office building in downtown Chicago. We specialized in digital marketing campaigns for lifestyle brands, fitness gear, eco-friendly startups, coffee chains. Nothing glamorous but solid. Work you could be proud of. The culture, up until Ethan arrived, was warm, collaborative. We weren't perfect, no workplaces, but there was this sense of camaraderie. We'd brainstorm over bagels, trade jokes across cubicles, leave post-it notes with doodles on each other's desks. Our manager, Alan, was in his 40s, laid back, approachable, the kind of leader who'd ask how your weekend was and actually care about the answer. Jenna, my closest work friend, was bubbly and sharp, with a laugh that carried across the whole floor. Mark, our graphic designer, wore headphones 24/7 but secretly had the best one-liners. It was a place where you wanted to work. Until Ethan. I've always believed that routines tell you a lot about a person. Mine? Simple. I'd wake up at 6:30, feed Oliver, brew a strong cup of coffee, cream no sugar, and skim emails while the city stretched awake. I'd walk to the train station, headphones in, listening to podcasts about everything from history to psychology. By the time I got to the office, I felt grounded, ready. At work, I wasn't the loudest voice in the room, but people listened when I spoke. I prepared carefully, I researched thoroughly. I made sure my work was polished before sending it out. That was my reputation. Skylar, the dependable one. So when Alan told us a new hire was joining, someone with impressive credentials who'd bring fresh energy, I didn't worry. Thought great. Another person to share the load. But from the moment Ethan opened his mouth, I realized this wasn't going to be that kind of story. I didn't know Ethan before Brightside. None of us did. But word spread quickly that he was a Harvard grad, that he'd interned with big names in Silicon Valley, that his father had connections in finance. Normally, we'd welcome someone new, maybe tease them about surviving their first client pitch. But Ethan wasn't looking for friends. He was looking for leverage. And even in those early days, I could feel his shadow stretching across the room. He sat in the meetings like he was auditioning for Shark Tank. He dropped buzzwords like synergy and disruption, with the smug certainty of someone who believed vocabulary was the same as vision. And worst of all, Alan bought into it, at least at first. It was like watching a magician perform. You knew it was smoke and mirrors, but everyone still applauded. I'll never forget my first one-on-one with Ethan. It was barely his second week. I was at the copy machine waiting for a stack of presentation drafts when he walked up beside me. "Skylar, right?" he asked, voice smooth. I nodded. "Yep. Ethan, isn't it?" He smiled, all teeth, no warmth. "That's me. I've been meaning to connect with you. I hear you've been here forever." 7 years, I said, keeping my tone light. "Wow," he said, stretching the word like taffy. 7 years in the same place. That's impressive. Must feel comfortable. Something about the way he said it made my skin prickle. Comfortable. Like it was an insult. "I like it here," I replied simply. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Well, don't get too comfortable. Things are about to change around here." And with that he walked away, leaving me staring at the whirring printer, wondering what on earth he meant. Looking back, that was Ethan's style. Planting seeds of unease. Making you doubt yourself, doubt your standing, doubt the ground you stood on. First, I brushed it off as arrogance. But soon it became clear, he had a plan. He wanted power. And he was willing to burn bridges, manipulate allies, and rewrite the rules to get it. And me? I wasn't about to let that happen without a fight. At first, Ethan's arrogance was like background noise. Annoying but ignorable. But within weeks it grew louder. Sharper. More destructive. Meetings, once collaborative, turned into his personal stage. Brainstorm sessions became monologues. Where we once shared ideas freely, people now hesitated, afraid their contributions would be mocked, dismissed, or worse, stolen. And stolen they were. It happened during our quarterly campaign pitch. I'd spent hours, days, working on a fresh concept for a new eco-friendly coffee brand. My angle was simple but effective. Tie the brand's sustainability message to everyday rituals, showing how small choices build a bigger future. I shared the idea in our prep session. Everyone nodded, impressed. Even Alan seemed excited. But when we walked into the official client meeting, Ethan leaned forward, confidence oozing from every pore, and said, "Here's what I think. Your brand isn't just selling coffee. You're selling rituals. Everyday moments that, when added together, create a bigger picture of sustainability. Imagine this tagline. Small sips. Big change." The exact words I'd said. My words. And Alan? He beamed at Ethan like he'd just reinvented the wheel. "Brilliant," Alan said. "That's exactly the kind of vision we need." I sat there stunned. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to smile, to play along. Calling him out in front of the client would have made me look petty, unprofessional. So I bit my tongue. But inside, the fire lit. After the meeting, Jenna cornered me in the break room. "Skylar," she whispered, anger flashing in her brown eyes. That was your idea. Everyone knows it. I sighed, leaning against the counter. Apparently not Alan. Jenna shook her head. He's playing a game. And he's good at it. I stirred my coffee slowly. Then we'll just have to be better. Credit theft was only the beginning. Soon Ethan began undermining people directly. During one presentation, Mark shared a new graphic design concept. Sleek, modern, eye-catching. Ethan leaned back in his chair, smirked, and said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Not bad for something that looks like it came out of 2010. The room chuckled nervously. Mark's face turned red. He tugged at his hoodie, muttering, "It's not 2010. But the damage was done." Another time, Jenna presented social media analytics. Ethan interrupted mid-sentence, waving his hand dismissively. Yeah, but what you're really trying to say is that my TikTok strategy worked, right? It wasn't his strategy. It was hers. But he spun the narrative so smoothly, Alan nodded along. One by one, he chipped away at our confidence. For me, the tipping point came during a Friday wrap-up. We were in the glass conference room, the skyline glittering behind us, when Alan asked for updates on the Johnson account. I opened my folder, ready to present. But Ethan cut in, sliding his laptop toward Alan like he'd been waiting for this. I actually took the liberty of reworking the proposal, he said smoothly. Skylar had some interesting starting points, but I thought it needed more punch. He clicked. My slides filled the screen, but edited, rearranged, stripped of nuance. And Alan? He clapped him on the shoulder. Good initiative, Ethan. That's what I like to see. My hands trembled under the table. The room blurred. It wasn't just about stealing credit anymore. It was about erasing me. By month 3, Brightside didn't feel like Brightside anymore. People spoke in hushed tones. Jokes died in throats. We weren't teammates, we were pawns on Ethan's chessboard. He positioned himself carefully, always close to Alan, always visible, always one step ahead in the perception game. And Alan, blinded by charisma, didn't notice the manipulation. Or maybe he did and just didn't care. Either way, morale plummeted. Projects dragged. People started using sick days more often. And through it all, Ethan strutted, convinced he was untouchable. At night, I'd go home to Oliver, collapse on the couch, and replay the day in my mind. Every stolen idea. Every smirk. Every jab. Part of me wanted to give up, to find another job, leave the toxicity behind. But another part of me, a part one didn't even know I had, refused. Why should he drive me out? Why should we all suffer while he thrived? No, I wasn't going anywhere. If Ethan wanted a game, then I'd give him one. By month 4, Ethan wasn't just arrogant, he was reckless. He'd grown so comfortable manipulating Alan and stealing credit that he stopped covering his tracks. He'd recycle the same buzzwords, slap his name on other people's work, and even brag openly in the break room. One morning, I overheard him laughing with a junior associate. Honestly, I don't even have to try that hard. They eat it up. Skylar does all the boring grunt work, I just add the sparkle, and boom, promotion material. The associate laughed nervously. I didn't. I stood frozen just outside the doorway, coffee cup trembling in my hand. That was the moment I knew. I couldn't let this continue. You see, arrogance blinds people. And Ethan was so blinded by his own ego that he didn't realize I was paying attention. Every stolen idea, every false claim, I documented it. Emails, timestamps, drafts. I kept a digital folder, quietly growing thicker each week. But evidence wasn't enough. I needed the perfect opportunity. And as fate would have it, it came in the form of our biggest client pitch of the year, the Hawthorne Hotel's account. Landing Hawthorne meant millions in revenue and serious prestige. Alan put Ethan and me on the project together, thinking our combined strengths would seal the deal. Ethan saw it as his chance to shine. I saw it as mine to strike. The night before the pitch, the office stayed late. Papers scattered, screens glowing, coffee cups piling high. Ethan strutted around like a general commanding troops, barking orders, rewriting slides, inserting his vision. At one point, Jenna leaned over to me, whispering, "Are we really letting him hijack this whole thing?" I gave a small, steady smile. Just wait, because here's what Ethan didn't know. I had already prepared my own version of the presentation. The real one, The one I'd been developing quietly, meticulously, aligning with the client's values and research. I'd shared drafts with Ellen weeks ago, planting seeds without Ethan noticing. And tomorrow, in front of Hawthorne's executives, those seeds would bloom. The next morning, the boardroom gleamed with polished wood and city views. Hawthorne's executives sat at the head of the table, crisp suits and sharp eyes scanning us. Alan opened with introductions, then gestured to Ethan. "Take it away," Alan said proudly. Ethan straightened his tie, stepped forward, and launched into his performance. He spoke smoothly, gesturing broadly, clicking through slides that were flashy but shallow. He used big words: immersive, paradigm, synergy. But when one executive asked a pointed question about data, Ethan stumbled. He stammered, dodged, then tried to pivot with a joke. The executives didn't laugh. Alan's smile wavered. A bead of sweat formed on Ethan's temple. When Ethan clicked to the final slide, expecting applause, the room sat in silence. One executive cleared her throat. "Interesting," she said carefully. "But we're not convinced this captures Hawthorne's brand identity. Do you have anything deeper?" Alan turned toward Ethan, but Ethan froze. His mouth opened, then closed again. His confidence cracked just for a moment. And that's when I spoke. "Actually," I said, keeping my tone calm but steady, "I anticipated you might want something more concrete. If it's all right, I'd like to show you an alternative direction we've been developing." Alan blinked in surprise. Ethan's head snapped toward me, eyes wide. But the executives nodded, intrigued. I rose, plugged in my laptop, and pulled up my presentation. Slide by slide, I walked them through the campaign. A tailored narrative rooted in Hawthorne's heritage. Data-driven strategies showing projected ROI. Visuals that reflected their luxury image, while emphasizing modern hospitality. As I spoke, I saw the executives lean forward. Their pens moved. Their expressions softened into nods. When I finished, silence filled the room, but this time it was the good kind. Then the lead executive smiled. "This," he said firmly, "this is exactly what we were looking for." Alan exhaled in relief. "Outstanding work, Skylar." "And Ethan?" He sat frozen, jaw clenched, color draining from his face. On the walk back to the office, Ethan stormed beside me. "You blindsided me," he hissed. I met his glare evenly. "No, Ethan. You blindsided yourself." Alan overheard. "What's that supposed to mean?" he asked. I stopped walking. My heart pounded, but my voice was steady. "Alan, with all respect, you've been crediting Ethan for work he didn't do. I've documented everything. Every draft, every idea, every timestamp. Hawthorne saw the truth today because I finally had the chance to show it." Alan's face tightened. He turned to Ethan. "Is that true?" Ethan sputtered. "She's twisting, she's jealous, But Alan's eyes were already hard. He wasn't stupid. He was embarrassed. And in that moment, Ethan's golden boy facade shattered. The downfall. By the end of the week, Ethan was gone. Terminated. No farewell party, no goodbyes. Just an empty desk where his arrogance used to sit. And me? I wasn't triumphant exactly. More relieved. The air in the office lifted. People laughed again. Ideas flowed again. Brightside felt like brightside. But deep down I knew. It wasn't just his downfall. It was a reminder that arrogance may rise fast, but it falls faster. And sometimes all it takes is one person willing to stand their ground. So, what did I learn from all of this? Honestly, more than I expected. Watching someone like Ethan fall wasn't just about revenge or getting even. It was a living, breathing reminder that arrogance, entitlement, and disrespect always come with a price. You might get away with it for a while, but sooner or later the truth will always catch up. And for me, it was proof that sometimes the quiet ones, the underestimated ones, the ones people dismiss as too ordinary, we're the ones who notice, who adapt, who endure, and who eventually rise. Ethan thought the spotlight was his forever. But what he didn't realize was that respect, trust, and loyalty are not things you can bully or fake. They're earned. And when you build your career on manipulation, on tearing others down, on thinking you're untouchable, you're just building your empire on sand. And one strong wave is all it takes to wash it away. And believe me, that wave came crashing down harder than he ever imagined. Now, if you've stuck with me this far, and I know many of you have been nodding along because you've probably met your own Ethan before, you know exactly why stories like this matter. Because they remind us that we're not powerless. That arrogance doesn't win forever. And that sometimes patience, strategy, and integrity can be the sharpest weapons of all. So let me ask you, backhand index pointing right, have you ever had to deal with someone like Ethan? Someone who walked into your life, your office, or even your circle of friends, and thought they could trample all over you. How did you handle it? Did you fight back? Did you stay quiet? Or did you outsmart them in the long run? I want to hear your stories. Share them down in the comments. Let's turn this space into a collection of victories, lessons, and maybe even warnings for the next Ethan, who thinks they're too clever to fall. And if you enjoyed this story, if you felt that rush of satisfaction when the arrogant finally faced their downfall, then don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more downfall stories just like this one, and share it with someone who could use a reminder that karma always, always finds its way home. Because in the end, every downfall starts with a single crack in the mask, and it's only a matter of time before the whole thing shatters. So here we are. Ethan, the new arrogant employee who thought the world revolved around him, ended up learning the hardest lesson of all. When you rise too fast without respect, without humility, and without understanding the value of people around you, your downfall is only a matter of time. And I'll be honest, watching it unfold was satisfying. Not because I wanted him to suffer, but because it was justice. It was the universe reminding him, reminding all of us, that arrogance never wins in the long run. Here's the thing. Workplaces, friendships, even families, they're all built on the same foundation. Trust. Respect. Teamwork. You can have all the talent in the world, you can talk louder than everyone else in the room, but if you don't have those three things, sooner or later, everything you've built will crumble. And Ethan? He crumbled spectacularly. What I took from this isn't just a story about one man's downfall. It's a reminder for me, and maybe for you, that no matter how much someone tries to overshadow you, your integrity, your persistence, and your quiet strength will shine through when it matters most. So the next time someone underestimates you, or tries to tear you down, remember Ethan. Remember how quickly the arrogant can fall. And remember that your patience, your resilience, and your character can be stronger than any fake confidence they try to throw in your face. Now I want to leave you with this question. Backhand index pointing right, have you ever seen someone like Ethan in your workplace, or maybe in your personal life, get exactly what they deserved? What happened and how did it make you feel? Drop your story in the comments. I can't wait to read them. And don't forget, if this story hit home, make sure to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next downfall story. Because trust me, I have plenty more where this came from. Until next time, remember this. Arrogance might shine bright for a moment, but humility and integrity, they'll outlast every downfall.